We are back. Thank you for joining us for this InfoWars Nightly News special report. This is part 2 of our interview in studio with a major food industry insider. Over 30 years, the trailblazer, the granddaddy of the storable foods movement. He has been absolutely on target with his breakdown and predictions because he's in the inside. He's ordering food a year out on contracts that hasn't even grown yet. And now food prices are exploding all over the world. Here, it's a serious pain in the butt. And some people go hungry, but overseas, it's a death sentence. Now, we talked about Global Food Crisis Special Report last week in part 1. And I had a lot to add, of course, in the 45-minute interview. So there are a few points Steve didn't get to. I want him to kind of recap and hit a few points that he wanted to finish. And then what I found really interesting in a private meeting we had yesterday before taping this, where he was really laying it out to me. And I said, you ought to say this on air. You ought to stay in town for another day and talk about this. So here he is. Secrets of the food industry. From the government angle, but also all these big companies and others rushing into storable foods as people understand. 50 million on food stamps, half the public and government assistance of some type, food shortages, the Chinese coming in and buying our food, buying all the African food. This is a perfect storm. We're hoping for the best, we're preparing for the worst, and it looks like the worst is what we're getting with QE3 and more. So Steve, right before we started taping again here, you were really laying some heavy stuff on me. So before we even get to recapping global food crisis and then get to the new info, you looked at me and you said, what would be the greatest cash crop if you were ruthless? And I figured it out in about 30 seconds when you were sitting there looking at me. But of course, I've said this myself in other ways, but it's true. And so let's try to recreate that now. We're sitting here, just taped the last 45 minutes, taking a break. Say it again, recreate that moment.
Well, what if you were a farmer and you were looking for the ideal cash crop or cash, investment? What if you found something, a critter that would pay to be born and would provide its own shelter, would provide its own food, provide a living, and pay you for the privilege of doing that. And then if it got sick, it would pay you to keep it alive while you went through several means of treatment. And
while they tested things on you that they kept for themselves at work.
Every 10 years they change one new drug, for another one, because the second one is going to offset the side effects of the first one, and they can keep you alive for a lot longer time. And then you kept that critter along, and then it pays for the final hospitalization, and then it pays to die.
And be planted.
And it pays to be buried. Now that would be an ideal cash crop.
And so you'd want to put fluoride in the water and other things, so you'd make them sick earlier, so you could get more of what they produce, so they would never get enough wealth to become your competitor. You wouldn't want people to do well either. You wouldn't want too much prosperity. In the old model, we weren't really being so much farmed, it was more of a prosperity system, but now we are being farmed. And the feudal farmers that are farming us, they don't want us to have prosperity, and they've taken the richest country in history, and in just 50 years of globalism, turned us into the greatest debtors who have to ship in 40% of our food.
Well, the interesting thing about it, I had thought at one time of writing a little pamphlet, Dictatorship for Idiots.
Ooh, that'd be good.
Okay, and here's what I do. I would tell the totalitarian governments, I would tell the wannabe dictators that they're going exactly the wrong direction. You see, the New World Order and all these idiots that want to control people are really stupid. Do you know how they could be wealthy and prosperous beyond their fondest dreams? Is if they took some of these third world countries, these little wannabe dictators, and they run around buying their wives all sorts of shoes while everybody else is starving. If they would take every person in that country and find a means by which they could use their talents and their abilities and make them so prosperous, and they wouldn't tax the money away from them, but they would make their economy so prosperous that every single soul, there were no poor among them. They would be wealthy beyond their possible imagination.
And the Federal Reserve admits, they call that overheating in the economy. They work constantly to suppress us, constantly to shift jobs, constantly to write tax codes where you've got to leave. They're doing everything they can to try to shut our economy down. It's called Agenda 21.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is, you got to say to yourself, how stupid are these people? They consider themselves the elite.
Well, they're sadists, so they'd rather make us poor and poisoned and ugly so they can feel good about themselves. They're evil. Steve, they're not like our founders, who weren't perfect, but compared to these people, they were like gods. I mean, they understood, hey, they had such good opinions of themselves, they're like, I'll just empower other people as well. People say, oh, well, some of them had slaves and stuff. It was their ideas that ended all that. That was in the time they were in. It's those ideas that have trailblazed everything.
The masters, the great masters of all times, Christ, Buddha, all of these guys, the ones that you don't even hear about, they're so advanced. They are never judgmental, and they are always seeking to uplift and improve mankind. And so the fascinating thing that you have is we have people who are intelligent, and in terms of learning, one of the things that I deal with constantly, and I'm just about, my book is going to be out in October, so
I want to have you on about that.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. But anyway, the fascinating thing is people learn in different ways. A true master can learn by reading about and studying other people's experiences. A wise man can learn by just observing what other people do. But most of us just have to pee on the electric fence.
Experience.
Yep, the hard way. But the fascinating thing about what we're doing here is we're trying to help people learn. You see, I should be retired right now. I don't need to run this company that I'm running. You don't need to make the money that you're making other than to keep funding what you're doing in terms of educating and helping people.
Listen, 6 years ago, we talked in. I had like 5-6 employees. I wanted to stay small, but I realized I'm already reaching so many people. I have a responsibility. It's torture to run 50 people. It's torture to try to get it all right. It's torture. Well, you and I dream of getting out of here. I dream of the New World Order being defeated and literally going and working on my family farm and ranch. You're absolutely right. That's why I admire George Washington. You know, the King of England, they were offering him the kingship, and George Washington, after 2 terms, he just said, I'm going to my farm. And that's what people don't get is that, well, I mean, you're absolutely right, though. And you're going all over the country educating people that you better be self-sufficient. And it does start with food, and that's how you finance your overall message. But we're doing the same thing here. You know, the globalists want you dependent. We don't want you dependent. We want you empowered. And it's the difference. And that's why the globalists are not the elite. Because if they were elite, they would know they want to empower humanity. And they say they want to empower humanity, but everything they do in their own real manuals, it's about putting humanity down. And I say they're the scum of the earth for it. Give us now, as an icon in your industry, known for over 30 years, all these people, you know, claim they were the first, this, that. I went and looked it up. You're the trailblazer. You've got the biggest company, the best company, the whole 9 yards, eFoodsDirect.com. You've got the floor. Lay out the secrets. Because, I mean, I begged you. You said, I don't want to go out and say bad things about people. Notice your advertisement doesn't do that. All the others there and say they're the best, everybody else is scum. Notice you're the one not saying that. But people deserve to know the truth. And there are some other good companies out there. But the point is, a lot of it is fly-by-night. You've been around over 30 years. Break it down for us, Steve Shank.
Well, the way I'm going to do that is the way I consider morally to do it. I'm not going to tell you what they do or don't do. I'm going to tell you what we do, and you can draw your own conclusions. Okay, here's the
okay.
I was in the dehydrated food business, shipping out storable food. Dehydrated food, typically when you got a can of carrots, they're just dried up old carrots, and you put them together with 7 or 8 other cans, you can make a meal. Just getting people prepared so that when the stuff hit the fan, they had food. The same principle that we're working with right now. But it became impossible for people really in our day and age to be able to use the food, so they had to just store it back and never use it, and it didn't taste all that great. So we decided that we were going to put out some food that was totally complete in and of itself, that they didn't have to do anything to, that they just boil some water and put some food in, and it had to be good food. Couldn't find anybody that makes it. No one makes it. All of the food storage companies out there buy from other suppliers that just have the recipes, and they buy it, put it in their can, put their label on it, and that's it. Couldn't find anything that we would eat ourselves or feed our grandkids. So we started making our own. Didn't want to. We're just a marketing company. So we started making our own food. Well, it was almost impossible to find food that didn't have added MSG, didn't have hydrogenated oil that'll make you glow in the dark, walk sideways, and one eye travel to the other side of your head. Didn't have genetically modified stuff that hasn't been proven. Then we got into looking into the genetically modified stuff and discovered that no one has ever been allowed to do any tests through the U.S. Department of Agriculture on genetically modified food and the long-term effects of it. But yet all of a sudden we have allergies coming out of our ears. We can't, you and I were raised on peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
They've never allowed it on humans. They have in Russia and China. Same thing you see in rats. There have been rodent studies, guinea pigs, you name it, sterilization, deformities, just it's devastating. It's and again, not just genetically modified, it's the cross species traits. Oh, this stuff is deadly.
You want to know about maybe your folks don't really understand what this genetic modification thing is. Let's take soybeans. That's the most common problem. You know, that's the one that
it's the filler.
Yeah, it's the one that's in everything, and that's where the genetic modification started with first. Monsanto created that genetic modification stuff, and now you have a hard time finding a soybean right now that's not genetically modified. In fact, we order our soy flour from one of the only plants in the entire country that will not allow genetically modified stuff in their plant. They can't. And so the whole thing with soy, here's how genetic modification goes. You've got a soybean. They want to find a means by which they don't have to cultivate. In other words, run the shovels through and dig up the weeds and do all that working of the land. They want to be able to spray Roundup on the stuff and kill off the weeds, but they have to have the plant not get killed off too, because it's a defoliant. So what you do is you take the gene pool from the soy, and this is going to be my explanation of it. This is not scientific. This is Steve Shank's simplified version so I can understand it. And then they take a bacteria, which is a critter, and they take some of the genetic licensing from that critter, and they put it together with the plant, and all of a sudden they have a plant that is half critter, half plant, not half and half, but enough of each.
And that's a cross species, but then it gets the trait they want, but then randomly has all these other traits. And you take the BT corn, it's got a fungus 1,000 times stronger than it should be, where it kills bugs that eat it, but it's okay for us to eat it, and we wonder why people are getting Alzheimer's at 30.
But you see, now let's look at allergies. You ever have anybody, I'm sure that your viewers out there know somebody that's had a liver transplant or one of the major transplants. What they have to do is knock down their immune system, something fierce, so that the body will accept that, because what the body is, the way it defends itself is it prevents anything foreign from coming in. It kills it off or gets rid of it, and it rejects it. Okay, now we've got a whole bunch of allergies going on, right? So what happens when the body eats something or consumes something like what you were talking about and like what I was talking about, that it says, oh, soy, cool, I'll eat that sucker. The Orientals have been living on soy for thousands of years. And all of a sudden it gets inside and it says, whoa, what's this? It's not a plant, it's not an animal. Reject.
And now you've got Crohn's disease.
Allergic reaction.
Yes, exactly. You're having an allergic, and all the doctors admit GMO is what's causing it to explode. But this industry now, what they had 8 major food crops GMO, now they're coming out with over 100. Everything. And then their genetics infects the similar species, and there's almost no corn varieties that haven't been infected.
I understand. Now you go back to our original subject.
It's like a space alien takeover.
There you go.
I mean, aliens, if they came here, this would be their plan, to kill us and kill us slowly, where they just incrementally kill us and we don't notice.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, how do you cook a frog? We won't go into that.
Back to the farming point. I've got to make this, and we're going to go through your other secrets.
Okay.
This article came out. The End of Humanity, Rise of the Robots, the Elite's Plan for Future doesn't include you, Alex Jones, Paul Watson. This has the quotes of the top futurists and top globalists saying, we've been farming you. Now we've got robots. We're going